with me for our first ever conversation session is Hasan Shah. Hasan is the director of Grassroots Member Engagement for AdvaMed. He's also the director of AdvaMed Advance. Welcome, Hasan.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. This is actually exciting to be the first one, so I'm glad to be here.
There can only be one first guest.
Yeah, right.
So thank you. And before we jump into the topic that we're going to talk about for today, just talk a little bit about what you do at AdvaMed, and also talk about your, I think now it's more than 20 years of experience in the advocacy world.
Sure. So as you said, I'm at AdvaMed, which is the Advanced Medical Technology Association. I run their grassroots program along with also being involved in their I&D initiatives for the industry. I think it's a good melding of those two areas, just because my grassroots skills come in handy in organizing the I&D work we need to do for the industry. So it works out well. In terms of my career, I always like to think of it as having had the opportunity to start at the very basic level when it comes to grassroots, just making cold calls on various issues and trying to educate people about them. Mike is chuckling because I worked for him back then as well, and he knows how I did it. So anyways, reaching out and talking to people about these issues, and I think it's a really important part in terms of being a practitioner of grassroots advocacy. I think it helps bring people directly in contact with democracy that we in the United States should and hope to practice on a regular basis. So I think it's a really important part. I think for me personally, understanding something from the very basic level, like at the start of what message is important and working your way up to a full-fledged campaign, is something that I've always enjoyed about it, and being able to work on multiple issues as well, just because you're always building something new. You're always addressing a new problem and finding a solution. Sometimes it's just reusing a solution, but there's always something new to think about. So that's sort of my 20 years. But from there, I think in the last 2 to 3 years, the career's also expanded out to being more, to include the public affairs element, the external affairs aspect, the direct lobbying aspect of it. But all that, again, comes back together to help me think through what grassroots, how grassroots plays a role in all of that.
So you mentioned there, so totally full disclosure, right? We've worked together not only as consultants, but we were both on the advocacy staff at JDRF. And so I thought your description there of your background, and certainly the part of it that you and I experienced together, what's impressed me about your background is that you've pretty much had the gamut of advocacy experience, right? You've had to help start programs, you've had to help expand programs, you've had to help reinvigorate programs, right? So you've seen all of these challenges over your 20 plus years. And so I thought, given that variety of experiences, you were actually probably the most well-positioned person I could think of to be able to talk about today's topic. And so today's topic is, what advice would you give to an organization that is just starting or thinking about starting its own advocacy program?
So if I had it my way, and if I got started from scratch, I think making sure that I am thinking about the information or data that I want to record first and foremost. And that data is important because that's the information that you'll use to devise your strategy and figuring out who you need to touch in terms of the legislators or the influencers for your policy or cause. That information will help you guide who you need to communicate to and with, and maybe even engage at a higher level. Mike, one of the things that we used to always talk about was, going from online to offline. And I think that transition is where we, at least for me, from the way I've seen it over the years, and certainly I experienced it at JDRF, was to get folks involved, meet them where they are, and then transition them out to something higher. It doesn't mean that they have to be doing meetings, because maybe it's not their forte. Maybe it's them just making phone calls, or maybe they're just doing, a letter to the editor, or something that's a lighter touch. But that information and being able to know what type of data that you'll want to track, and then using that to basically develop your strategy, I think is the starting point for me. And then, you just sort of keep thinking through what you're doing. And when I say what you're doing, is really constantly tinkering to think through what other ways you can engage someone on that campaign or that program. It can be either way. I mean, it could be a campaign or a broader program, like organizations tend to have. So.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. You and I have kind of had to both think through this challenge specifically in terms of data, but it is like one of those foundational pieces. And if you don't think through it as you get started, it's like any other, structure that you're thinking about building, right? If a piece of the foundation for that structure is missing, at some point in the future, you're going to pay for that, right? So part of your program is very likely, I mean, at best, it's not going to work as well as it could. At worst, it's going to collapse because you didn't think through that key part to the effort. And I would also say, at least as you and I sit here today, it is April 2022. I mean, to me, the best news for organizations who are in this situation, thinking about starting their own advocacy program, is that there is a constituent relationship management platform, or CRM, for literally every price point, right? So even if you're a small nonprofit, all the way up to the big associations, like you work for at AdvaMed, and everything in between, there's going to be some product that allows your organization to collect and, to some degree, at least, analyze the information to make better decisions. So, when we were first getting started, I don't think we could, for sure, we couldn't say that. The platforms were reserved for wealthier organizations, but that entire kind of product space in the advocacy world has been democratized to allow everyone to be able to fill this important part of their advocacy program as they get started. So that makes.
I was going to say, going back to your point about not having thought through the data. Well, it's a foundational aspect, but it'll also cost you a heck of a lot more if you have to think through it later. Right. And I think the other challenge is making sure that once you've decided on the information that you want to collect, you also want to work on the buy-in from your leadership to make sure that they recognize the importance of that. Because if you're working in an organization that's spread across the country or the state, as we tend to be nowadays, you want everyone working from the same playbook. So.
That is an excellent point, both in terms of, being able to, once you've converted data to information, being able to feed that strategy to the other members of the public affairs team, right? Like classically, that's going to be the sharing back and forth between the advocacy folks and the lobbying team. But also when it comes to budgeting time and budgeting cycles, and, you're going to think through projects or campaigns that you want to be able to execute, which always wind up costing more money than we want them to cost, no matter what it is. Having all of that data at your disposal helps making your case much easier to the folks who who hold the purse strings. So that's another great point. I mean, that information is valuable all along the way from a program development standpoint, for sure.
I have so many more tips on this, but I don't want to go over your limit. So. And maybe you'll invite me back. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll set it up.
So we've already set up Hasan Shah's return to at some point to the Advocacy Answered Conversation Series to talk over more of these tips. But Hasan, I appreciate your time and of course your willingness to be our very first guest. Thank you so much.
It's my honor. Thank you, sir. Thanks for thinking of me.
Thanks, man.